Lights, camera, action. Okay, fantastic. All right. So here we are. We're down at Fensmere, and I'm down here with Simon Litmoden, and an angler who fishing this week. Had a good week.
Yeah, loving it.
Had a nice 63. First fish as well. That was. Yeah, started with a bang, which was absolutely fantastic. I've had an absolutely fantastic week, and it's been such a pleasure to have you guys here.
Loving
to be honest, mate, it's brilliant. I come down occasionally and nick a few of your stellas, don't I? So the idea of this is similar to sitting down with Billy Berridge, when we were up at Purdue. It's going to follow on from the buying a lake in France. The problems and things that can occur, the reasons for buying lakes in France, and all the things that can go on with buying lakes in France. And Simon has history of buying and running and then selling a lake in France. So when I found this out, I thought this is a fantastic opportunity to delve into more of the things that many people aspire to get in a lake in France, and many of them have no understanding of the pitfalls and the problems that can beface us on that journey. And so I thought it'd be a wicked chance to sit down with you and go through your experiences.
Yeah. And
again, I'll interject maybe through time if I've got a similar experience or have had similar or maybe a completely alternate experience, because I think it's a minefield, isn't it, getting a place out here. There's lots of ups and there's lots of downs, and there's lots of money to spend. Yes, there's lots of money to spend. So, right, without any further ado, we're going to get stuck into it, mate. So, firstly, I've created these list of questions again. They're not exactly the same as I had with Billy, because I think another area of this one is the aside that we never talked about, which is selling a lake in France. Yeah. And obviously you got great experience with that, having done it. And I think it's something we just chatted about beforehand, which was, in any business you get into it knowing how to get out of it. And so most people, I think, would, they they go through the process, buy a lake in France, but they've got no idea of how they're going to get out of that situation. So I think, as a coach, someone that that's a very goal-driven individual, as I am, I begin with the end in mind. So I have a plan of where I want to get and how I'm going to, and then I devise the plan to get there. Yeah. And but I never start without having an end. And I think it's an important consideration to have for everyone coming over here to buy a place. So I wanted to really delve into that as we get into the discussion. And hopefully we can tease out some really great information for people to delve into. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Si, and just a little bit about yourself, really, yeah, and then what motivated you, what inspired you to get a lake in France.
So like you, I've been a fisherman since I was probably 10, 11. But I started coming to France carp fishing when I was 18. So by the time I bought my lake...
That would have only been about 10 years ago, Simon, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I was 25 years in.
Yeah.
Of coming to France. So I've probably done, between 100, 200 trips to France. I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, wow.
It just spoke to me. I love the countryside, the nature, and the fishing. And I remember in some of my early trips, I would have gone to some of the venues offered by the Miller family, and they were some of the pioneers in offering accommodation with smaller lakes.
Yep.
So you had the Laquise, the Dream Lakes, but you had these guys who were starting to specialise in what package a property with a lake.
Yeah.
And that spoke to me, and it was probably something I filed in my head, and later in life that opportunity came along to acquire. But first and foremost, I was a fisherman, and like most fishermen, you dream of owning water. Yeah, you dream of having a lake, don't you? Yeah.
And so, but there's a massive step to take, though, isn't there, between being a fisherman and then owning a lake.
Yeah.
And not just owning a lake, owning a lake in a foreign country. Mm-hmm. With completely different legal system, and everything is completely different, and a different language. So had you had any experience in running lakes or management of lakes or anything like that? You're You're not a spa shop.
No,
Like you haven't come
no,
through that area.
no, completely ignorant and naive, just a fisherman. I mean, I probably should mention that in my early years of fishing, I liked to go to the Champagne region, and so I fished around a lot around Lac du Der, Chanticoq, which 12,000 acre inland sea,
Yeah.
and so that area I just really enjoyed it and liked it. So I did have an opportunity to acquire a small holiday home there. So my first
Ah, okay. Yeah. Nice.
experience of the French system was a baby step into
Yeah,
buying just a
nice.
little holiday home just on Lac du Der.
Yeah.
So I had that for a period of time. So it was a gentle introduction into
Yeah. So
coming into the French system.
so in that you dealt with no tears. You
Yes.
dealt with all of those sorts
Yeah.
of intricacies, which are a difficult thing to deal with. Okay, so that's an interesting one, and that's quite a I mean, that's obviously it is a baby step in
Yeah.
because you had a lot of that understanding and knowledge.
Yeah.
And did you sell that place and buy the other one straight away, or had you already sold the other one?
No, I I had that one first, and we had that primarily as a holiday let, I suppose, that we would use primarily as a family. Of course, I would fish at Lac du Der,
Yeah.
but we would enjoy everything around the area. We just used it for long weekends away. It was a
Yeah.
bit of an indulgence. I mean, throughout my time of owning a lake, I was lucky to have a primary income.
Yeah.
So I was working for a living, so I was able to fund these things. And back in the day when I acquired that first property, I think the exchange rate was £1 to €1.50. So it made it, a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel so painful to do that, but it gave me my introduction.
Yeah.
It didn't feel scary. It was
Yeah.
it encouraged me and gave me confidence to then, well, that's someone else's lake. I'd love to
Have yours.
have a house, but with
With
my
a
own
lake. Yeah, that the old the classic with exchange rates is a deal breaker in some respects. I know our first property that we looked at, it basically the exchange rate changed from Australian dollars, and it made it literally in 1 month made it 100,000
Yeah.
Aussie dollars more expensive. And so it was just out of our range then,
Yeah.
and we that's why we came here.
Yeah.
This was not our first choice originally. But we had the flip side of that when we moved to Australia. It was 2.5, 2.6 Aussie dollars to the pound,
Yeah.
which was a massive, but step up. It's what enabled a lot of things to happen because of that bloody great exchange rate, which was
You
wonderful.
take your luck, don't you?
Yeah. So, okay, so you've bought a place
Yep.
in France originally, and so you've got a bit of an understanding. When you then bought your Carp Lake, what was that? What was the process there? I mean, how did you find it? How was it? What sort of state was it in? What drew you to that one?
I mean, I've heard and I've seen a lot of people who give their story of I jumped in a camper van and I scoured the country and I visited 100 lakes and tested this and kicked the tyres on that. We bought ours over the internet. It was the second one I saw, and it's probably important I explain that at the time I was living overseas, so I was in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I subsequently sold my little holiday let at Lac du Der, so I persuaded my wife that help me
Good
realise
woman.
my passion. Yeah, she's a good woman, and she indulged me that, and so. I started scouring because, of course, I was 3,000 miles away from France. Yeah. We did go and look at one that was perhaps just too much of a doer-upper, but the second one was found on the internet. I contacted the owner. It was a direct sale, so I'm not going through agents.
Okay, yep, that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Yep.
That was more luck than anything. I jumped on a plane, went to Paris, drove to Normandy, and had a look, and I knew nothing. All I saw was a body of water, and I could see myself sitting by it.
Okay, so again, you got that, which was directly with the owner. So it's the same as how we bought here. Actually, it was through the owner. There was no agent involved.
Yeah.
And again, we might have talked about this with Billy, but the agency fees are paid by the buyer, aren't they, over here?
Correct.
So again, you have to add. You're buying a place over here. You've got to add that to your other fees, as well as the notaire fees, which
Yes.
I don't know, nowadays maybe are they 2.5%, something like that.
Yeah, there's a sliding scale, isn't there?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yep. So these are all things that you definitely need to do. So if you are looking at properties that are sold directly by the owner, it can save you a little bit of money. But are there any concerns or worries with that?
Yeah, of course. You know, the owner is always, well, potentially is going to just talk about the good things and the lifestyle and, you know, the fish in the lake and blah blah blah. They're not going to say, well, there's a hole in the dam and, you know, should really fix this, or, you know, the septic tank needs addressing, or the wiring's a bit dodgy. So, you know, we got painted the perfect picture, and so we went into it eyes wide open, thinking, you know, there are going to be potential issues. We need to make
Yeah.
sure that we are prepared for that.
You got a contingency for it, yeah.
But I think before I get to that stage, the most important thing for me to say, and perhaps it's different now, is that I didn't have the money at the time. I was employed, and I was, you know, I was earning a reasonable wage, but I certainly didn't have a lump sum to just go and, you
Get
know,
it done.
buy a lake.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was the ability to go to the French banks and take a mortgage.
Oh, okay.
So I took a mortgage. With
Oh,
the
yeah, because
BNP.
we were still we were part of the EU
We
then,
were
was
part
it?
of the EU.
Yeah.
Money was very cheap back then because interest rates were super low, and they were accepting, you know, British nationals for an overseas. They had a dedicated team for overseas mortgages.
Oh.
So I took debt on to acquire my
Yeah.
lake, and my thinking there was I probably didn't have a decent enough pension, so if the debt was cheap, I would just, you know, pay down the debt, so increase my equity in the property,
Yep.
instead of, you know, chucking money into a pension that I didn't really
Yep.
understand. So I did take debt on. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it today. I think it's a lot more difficult, if
Incredibly
possible.
difficult. Well, as I've talked to you about, we've had to do and fund everything here through capital,
Yeah,
and now we've got no capital
yeah,
because, you know, I wouldn't ever have done that.
no,
Especially here when I could have borrowed when we got here money at like 1.5% or
Yeah.
2%. It was
Yeah.
just ridiculous. You would never spend your capital when you
Yeah.
could borrow that quick, that
Exactly.
cheaply. But nobody would lend us, not even buy cars.
No.
Nothing, absolutely nothing. Very, very difficult to get
Very
money
difficult, yeah.
nowadays. So that, yeah, but that was probably that was a good shrewd plan, wasn't it? And a good, as long as you knew that your job was stable and you knew you could fund that
Yes.
and service that loan, and it's
Yeah.
not really a problem.
Yeah.
And it's because, unlike, I suppose, if you're coming over here from the UK and you're going lock, stock and barrel into a lake, and that is your primary and only source of income, then and that is a lot. That is what it is for many of the lake owners, English lake owners here. That
Correct.
is their main source of income, and so that's to have debt then with such what I would class as a tumultuous. That's not the right word. It's quite a risky business to have all your eggs in the one basket, because it's livestock, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, we can talk about all this down the track, you know, in terms of fish and what have you, but it's livestock, and when you've got livestock, as any farmer says, you've got dead stock.
Yes.
And if all your fish turn,
Yeah, I mean, the emotional roller coaster of that route is just too much for me. And certainly when I bought it from a chap who was probably mid to late 60s. It was his sole income, so it was already operating as a commercial
yeah,
entity. So it was, you know, attracting English anglers across, but that was his sole income.
yeah,
And I could see the limits to what he could do, because he was hitting the ceiling of what he could spend,
yeah,
and at the same time live.
yes,
And
yeah,
that's not an uncommon situation, I think, for people who have bought. Well, I bought in 2009, but, you know, I've seen several that have perhaps sort of got older. The income limit is there because it was their, you know, life savings, sold a business, whatever, but it was their sole income. Mine was different. I always made sure I had a primary income in place,
yeah.
and it was a reasonable primary income so that I could do what I wanted to do and put my stamp on it.
Yeah, and that's probably most people don't have that facility.
No.
Well, but the sacrifice you made for that was that you lived 3,000 miles or kilometres away. So
I had it 12
yes.
years. I never ever lived there.
Yeah, so that's tough, isn't it? Because you never got to live that life that
No.
you really would have probably
Yeah.
have probably been nice to
Yeah,
for a
I
bit
would
of
have loved
time.
it. I would
Yeah,
have
yeah,
loved it.
yeah,
But yeah, it was just the wrong time. But I'd still no regrets about that.
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting one though. That with the the financing of it over here. If your lake is your primary driver of the finance, which funds everything, your living, your eating, your all your bills and everything, and the restocking of the
Mm.
lake and what have you. That's a lot of pressure on fishery owners when
Yeah.
that's the case. I'm the same. When I came here, I still have a business in Australia. So
Mm.
although it's not a big earner, it's enough to pay our bills.
Mm.
And I still coach professional athletes around the
Yeah.
world, and I just keep that ticking over because it's still just that little bit that might pay your fuel, pay your insurances and what have you each month. Um, so that's and another thing that another thing I've done here, which is the development and startup of the fish farm, because obviously a lake has a finite amount of what it can bring in. And we've talked about this as well, haven't we, with regards to multiple different lakes. You know, carp fishing has become a such a monster and a behemoth of well, it's just a behemoth. There's
Yeah.
so much money involved in it now. But you, again, I think there's a limit to what you can charge a couple of blokes coming away
Yeah.
for a week's holiday. And in this situation, like we've attracted a specific type of clientele because we only open for 14 weeks of the year, and it's hard.
Yeah.
It's not an easy lake.
No.
You can't come here and get loads of runs, but
No.
there's a lot of very special fish in here. So we again set it as I began with the end in mind. There, I knew I had like within lakes within France. If you're just doing exactly the same as everyone else, you're battling with them as a who can catch the most fish in a day and the most of this and most of that. And so you have to find a niche area
Find your
in
niche.
that, don't you?
Absolutely.
You have to find your
But
niche.
I mean, if I was to boil everything that we've just spoken about down, and this is why I wanted to participate in this chat, is that unless you've won the lottery or sold a business for a seven-figure number, you really need to think very hard about acquiring a French fishery, because if you're sitting at home in the UK and you've got a bit of equity in your property and you think, well, if I sell this and then I go and buy my French dream with that equity, that is not a sustainable model, because you've spent all of your money on acquiring but you have no contingency. And the contingency piece, as I'm sure everybody you've spoken to, is the bit that will bite you in the arse,
Yeah.
because it's a six-figure number.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. And it is something which it's what draws people to France in the first place, is because from England, obviously, and in Australia was the same. You develop quite a lot of asset within your property because it has big capital gains.
Yeah.
In England's Australia the same. You buy a property 10 years ago, it's doubled in
Yeah.
price, and in some places
Yeah.
more than that. In France it doesn't.
No.
So in France your property values might sometimes drop a little, but they don't go you don't get that huge
No.
capital gain over time.
No.
So our experience again, and we just chatted about this a little bit earlier, which is how much did it cost, and we both know that the buy-in to France is cheap, but the actual cost and keeping things going is expensive. It's not a cheap country to live in.
No.
How would you have said that? I mean, how would you? I mean, you've like us. We've lived at different places around the world. I think France is one of the most expensive places we've lived in.
Yeah.
In real terms.
I lived in Dubai. That was expensive, but I would say here is more expensive now. And I had a lot of people come to my lake who, a bit like if they come here, you see it. You wake up to the dawn, you can imagine yourself there. They want to live that dream. And I always said, you need to understand that you are buying a lifestyle, and if it's a lifestyle that has those luxuries, it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
Because not everybody, it's a rarefied few who can commit to that over the longer term and enjoy it for what it is. It costs money to do that, not just the initial I've bought a lake.
bought a lake and you've maybe go, right, okay, you've done a bit of research, you know it's going to be 50, 60 grand to put fish in. You've got this and this and this and this. I mean, yeah, for us, it's ridiculous with your insurances.
Yeah.
Is humongous.
Yeah.
Your taxation, your income tax over here is not massive, but it's all the social taxes and stuff which comes to bite you. And again, that's why as I said, I kept the business going. I still have in Australia, but we set up the fish farm, and then we set the fish farm up we can earn a lot more money from the fish farm than we can from the lake itself.
Yeah.
But it also, what it does, it serves us as lake owners, because it means that we control our stock. So I don't have to buy fish from anybody. I know that they're on the same water, and I can just bring them here whenever. If I net that lake in the winter and go, oh, that's just a ripper, I know I can bring it here and it'll integrate straight away. So that was a strategy. And again, if you're buying and you're thinking of buying over here, I think it's important to have these other strings to your bow.
Definitely.
That can, and I know, again, there's plenty of people that I know that have got lakes, and they were, ex-plumbers or ex-electricians, and they're still doing that because they have to do that.
Yeah.
They have
go
to
back, and I mean, we would sell about 25 weeks a year. Let's say about 1,500 quid a week.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever made profit. We
Yeah.
sunk it all back in.
Yeah.
The feed, the stock, the ongoing improvements, the utilities, the French taxes, the ancillary taxes, like the equivalent of council tax, etc. Your insurances, it all went back into the business. I don't, it certainly wasn't a money-making enterprise.
No.
It was a lifestyle.
Yeah, and that's the key, isn't it? I think that you keep saying that, and that is the key. It's a lifestyle, a hard work lifestyle, but something which is, I mean, it's not bad, is it? It ain't bad. So, how did you find the lake you ended up? You said via the internet.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, no due diligence really. I looked at the lake. It broadly looked all right. It had like a lot. I was in Normandy, so northern France, so about an hour and a half from the port of Caen. That felt like a good location to be for because I wanted to operate commercially.
Yeah.
It was a traditional lake in that it had a deep end, a dam wall, and a shallow end.
Yeah.
So it felt like it had depth. And I remember the original owner, and no disrespect to him, he said to me, Simon, I'll tell you now, if it can be done, I've thought of it. So, just buy it and enjoy it. And I felt like that was a bit of a challenge, because I looked around and thought, well, I want to put my stamp on it as a fisherman.
Yeah.
As I like to fish, I would like it to be like that for other people. So I tried to, design it around how I enjoyed fishing.
Yeah, and I looked. You sent me the old video that was done for when you sold.
Yeah.
And you did a beautiful job. I mean, it was all gravelled round the lake, so you never had to deal with mud as an angler.
4,000 tons of Type 1.
Yep, and and all the swims were manicured and lovely. Look, I am, as you, and it's probably why we get on so well. I'm pretty much the same. I go and fish all these big barrages like you have, but it's nothing. When you come away on holiday, you don't want to be up to your knees in mud, do you?
Yeah.
It's much nicer when you've got swims that are done and everything's cushy. You're not covered in crap when you pack your van to go home. It's a much nicer experience. Yeah. So you chose northern France, greater access, less travel for the English anglers, which makes perfect sense. It was very similar to what Billy did.
Yeah.
Did you have any legal or administrative sort of surprises that you didn't know about when you got into it, that you thought, well, hang on, I didn't realise this. I didn't realise about this, or this was a bit of a shock.
No, I think we paid a couple of quid to someone to be an interpreter who was bilingual, who lived locally. So, we wanted to make sure that we understood what we were signing for, because, as you know, it can be a bit daunting when you sign in the compromise.
We did the same. Yeah,
it's a legally binding contract that has a penalty if you change your mind.
Yeah.
So, we did that. If I had my time again, and I'm speaking now, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, I would much rather chuck a bit of money at someone who knows what lakes are about and who are here to go, right, I need you as a partner to help me source a lake. I want to buy a lake.
Yeah.
You know, how I did it is the wrong way to do it. Off the internet, go and have a look. Go, yeah.
So there's an element. There was an element of luck there. An element of luck.
Complete
Yeah.
luck. If
Could
I
have
did
stung you. Could have stung you in the arse.
Totally. But you know,
Yeah.
if I did have my time again now, I would look for someone who is in France, who's all running an established business, who, you know, like you, has access to fish as well. You know, can give you that whole you know, solution to go, right, I need help because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, I do wonder, mate. You know, obviously your story was a successful story,
But luck.
and but yeah, I wonder how many. I just wonder how many. It'd be very interesting to hear if anyone is listening to these that has gone through a horror story and would be prepared to talk about it, because I think it would be very, very insightful for people, for potential owners. Obviously, I've chatted with Billy. We're chatting now. You know, I do my vlogs all the time, looking at what's going on here, and you can see the ups and downs of fishery management and fishery life, because I chart it, and it isn't all beer and skittles, as I say. There is carnage, but it's for us, for me, it's manageable carnage. You know, is there anyone out there that's had has really been burnt by this? Because I bet there's so many.
There is, you know, without names, I know there is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm chucking numbers out, and if I went, right, Mark, you know, I'm going to give you £1,000 to help me for a month, you know, you know, give me 3 lakes I should seriously look at. If that saves me 50 grand down the line, then, you know, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people to partner with someone who's already out here and knows their stuff, who can just whittle it down, boil down the ocean of lakes, because there's a lot of lakes out here.
Yeah,
right?
there is. Yeah,
But
yeah.
you could end up buying one that's 1 foot deep and 6 foot thick.
Yeah, especially if you're in Dubai buying it on the internet. Yeah, I mean, the fact, I suppose, you know, to counter that though, and you know, it wasn't so much of a leap. It was a running fishery, etc. But what you don't know in those situations is you know, you don't know how deep the silt is. Does it need draining? Like you said, what's the stock? Are they all stunted?
Yeah.
You know, rubbish carp that aren't going to go anywhere. Is the dam wall? Is there leaks? How's the monk system? And all of those. Yeah. And look, you know, I've done a few videos now, back on the YouTube channel, assessing 2 lakes, where I do exactly that. Really, I'm looking at them from a perspective for us to take on as Fensmere Fish Farm, to develop fish there. But also we would then look to develop those lakes in the future for the owners as fisheries. And so I've done, you know, you do the water testing, you're looking at where the water source is coming from, you're looking at the depth. I've done the silt testing, your water parameters, all the chemical parameters of your water. All them things are vitally important. You know, if you've got a load of farmers, big commercial farmers right around you, is it diverted? Is it a closed lake, open lake? And there's a lot to deal with, isn't there?
Well, I mean, if you put it another way, Mark, I mean, one of the first things I did, we bought ours in the October, and one of the first things I wanted to do was to buy fish. I wanted my own fish.
Yeah.
And again, I just found a fish farmer. He happened to be English. And when he delivered the fish, he said to me, he goes, right, now, Simon, he goes, I'm going to tell you something really important. He said, forget about these fish that I'm just putting in your lake. He said, the first thing you have to understand is you're keeping water.
Yes.
You are keeping water, and if you keep that correctly, the fish will look after themselves. And it was the best bit of advice I ever got, because he was so right. You have to treat it like a giant aquarium, don't you? You need to be able to change the water. So you need fresh water. You need an exit for the old water. You need to be able to test the water. And, you know, that's the work I put into my lake to make sure that it was almost like a giant aquarium, that I could do those things. Take a bit out, put a bit in, see how the water was. And if that all was right, then the carp flourished.
Yeah, and this is something I'm going to chat with Billy about, and this is something we do a lot, obviously, and that actually guided the buying. I looked on Google Earth and what have you a long time before I made, any of the lakes that I looked at had to have primarily a very good water source, and I liked it right at the top of the chain, because otherwise you're not then getting second-hand water from polluted from above, basically. Now those lakes can sometimes be more prolific or more nutritious or more nutrient rich because obviously they're down the chain, but they're more open to problems.
Yeah.
You know, those nutrient rich lakes are more
And you're
open
managing
to
algae.
issues. Yeah, that's right. They're more problematic. So yeah, getting that right, and that's right. A farmer, a normal livestock farmer, treats the animal. A fishery owner
Yeah.
treats the water,
Yeah.
and the animal looks
The
after
environment.
itself.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and the animal. Yeah, yeah. I'm just going to quickly check this to make sure we're not talking. Oh, there we go. That was still good. Marvellous. Yeah, we're all good. We're still running.
All right.
All right. So okay. So you've got your lake.
Yep.
You've had your fish farmer. You've how long was it before you got your fish farmer in?
3 months, couldn't wait.
3
Stuck 'em
months.
Straight in.
Yep.
Didn't know the provenance
What
of them or
sort?
anything.
What sort of? I mean, so had you already drained the lake when you did that?
No.
No.
No. I just was excited. You know, chucked them in. Didn't know the biomass. Didn't know the origin of the fish.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, you know, Wild West, silly things to do. But, you know, things I would never advise anyone else to do. But, you know, you're excited. You want to
Yeah.
get on with it. I was told once the best way to never forget your anniversary is to forget it once. So I was prepared to make mistakes because if I made a mistake, it would educate me and hopefully, you know,
Yeah. The
get me on the right
experiential learning is the greatest learning tool.
Yeah,
Yes.
make some mistakes. So
Yeah.
I was prepared to do that, but of course I had the cushion of the primary income.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah.
I could be a bit maverick in some of the things. That
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did.
yeah, yeah. So looking back at that now, again, I've chatted with Billy, and I've chatted to several people that have contacted me after watching the earlier videos, and asked me to actually already go and look at lakes and stuff for them. And I say, I won't put any of my fish into your lake until I know what's already in your lake. So I said, first of all, it needs to be drained. You need to assess biomass, get rid of anything in there. In fact, you're better off because you don't know the provenance of anything that you've got in your lake unless you already do.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything and start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then you're starting from scratch, aren't you? And you know full well exactly what amount of fish you got in the lake, so you can feed it precisely to that biomass within the lake.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. So when you got your fish, so did you go to the fish farm to select them,
No.
or did you just
No.
he just turned up with them?
Yeah, just turned up with them. I paid a deposit. They came. I didn't select anything. Yeah, that changed over time because
Yeah,
of
because
course,
as you learnt more.
yeah, learnt more. Some died, you know, as they do.
Yeah.
There is a mortality rate involved in this game, as you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that just evolved my journey, and I went up the curve of understanding, you know, what I wanted to buy and from whom, and how I did my due diligence. But I was down here right at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I go back to what I said a few minutes ago. Partner with someone who knows that it saves you so much time and money to kind of navigate that first part.
Yeah.
Just speeds up things.
Yeah, because I suppose although experiential learning is probably the greatest tool to actually really teach us a lesson, a life lesson, it can be very painful.
Yeah.
And I suppose some people want to make and maybe as you'd said you had that cushion, so therefore you wanted to go through the process of maybe making a few mistakes because that's what that's what gave you that learning. But you've got to have the finances to do that.
I mean, I poisoned 50. I lost 50 carp in my lake, up to 50 pounds, because
Right.
I fed them at the wrong time
Right.
and had an ammonia spike.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I probably could have done with better advice back then. But you know, I was young and keen and wanted just thought
So
I knew better.
So what was that? What did you do?
I put maize in. We'd had a very mild winter. The fish were feeding well in late December, early January. I was back in the Middle East. The guy, I had assistance. I paid someone to help me manage the lake, and I said, keep feeding, and they'd stopped. So we kept feeding, and that maize just rotted.
Yeah.
Ammonia spiked, and then come early March, they're popping up.
They all popped up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I made plenty of mistakes, and some of them were expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's classic. I've talked about this. I've done a video on it, and I think again something that a lot of fishery owners are not using to really help them with that feeding side of things is my underwater camera stuff.
Oh,
You know, you because you don't, especially with something like maize. If you are feeding maize, I mean, you know, I'm not a great. I do feed. We do feed a bit of maize. I do feed a bit of maize up at the fish farm. I often only feed it later summer, and vegetable based um, foods. I generally only feed when the water temperature's high.
yeah,
Again, there's not a great deal of research on this, but my belief there is that um, the fish's enzymes can actually process those vegetable-based baits
yeah.
and in warmer
Warmer
temperatures.
temperature.
And so many people feed big amounts of maize through the winter because it's cheap, of course.
But it's moving slow through the body, right?
Moving slow through the body. It's
Yeah.
not the sort of food that you want to be feeding in winter times, in my mind, and so many people do. And I might have a few people and get onto the onto the chat and tell me otherwise. You know, I'm one of these guys. My background's in science, but I like challenges and I like people to give me information I don't know, and to counter what I'm saying. But I don't feed any vegetable based stuff through the winter at all. And you'll give a primary example of what potential
Yeah.
problems can happen.
If you get that wrong, and it's fine margins, and you know, to just come back on your camera, I watch your videos. I copied that because I help out at a very well established complex of lakes in the UK where the stock is irreplaceable, and we feed them and augment the feed that the anglers give. And we went and bought one of these cameras. It's less than 50 quid on Amazon. We've installed it. We only feed now when that camera shows the food's gone. So
Brilliant. No,
when
brilliant. That's awesome. That's awesome.
When
Stoked.
when I was feeding, we didn't have that technology. So
Yeah.
it's so simple and easy to
And
do.
cheap.
Yeah,
And cheap.
Yeah.
Takes I just drift out on my boat as
Yeah.
I've said. I've got it attached to the pole. I go down.
So easy.
It's gone. Although there's a couple left,
Yeah,
but that's not going to cause you your issues. Yeah. No, brilliant. So when you got your stock in, did you have to get? I mean, this is another thing over here. With all the work you done on your place, which was stunning. As I say, I looked through the video last night, and you'd done a fantastic job. It was beautiful. Did you need to get any planning there, or did you have to deal with the DDT and environment agencies over here? Did you have any issues?
No, I mean, my lake was a Cassini, so it was a pre-Napoleonic.
Pre-Napoleonic, yep.
Which has some benefits.
Yep.
But I did have a stream running round it, and the DDT in the early days were very arm's length. They really left us alone. We had no certification when I bought mine in 2009. I didn't even think of that. I didn't know what the DDT was.
Yeah.
But became aware of it and respected that they had control and power over what I did. One of the important things for me, where I had a stream going round, was to actually take access to that stream. And as a Cassini, I had an ability to do that, so I did. So one of the first jobs that we did is we wanted to make sure that we could bring in water and also exit water, because I wanted to drain, I wanted to bring the level down, I wanted to see what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
So that was probably our primary job. Take a feed, and make sure I could exit water at the same time, and ideally exit water from the bottom of the lake rather than skim it off the top.
Where and again, this is something which there were new rules, but maybe people in the last few weeks will have seen stuff going around there, which was
I saw that.
the worry of the DDT coming and filling your lake in. And now, to be honest, I went through all of that, and there's nothing new. There wasn't anything new that we don't already have the rules for, to be honest. And knowing the DDT, I've dealt with them extensively in the 2 lakes here that 4 lakes here that I have, and knowing other people's experiences. Each department is very different, and the DDT have a very different viewpoint on carp, especially. And in some areas they can be very helpful and progressive, and in some areas they can be royal pain in the bum. But they generally have been pretty good. they want to work. They want to try and make sure that everything's right. And I think if you're a good owner, you want to. You know, we're carp fishermen. We sit out in nature all the time. We want to make things the best. I always just want to make this place the most beautiful place for nature and as I possibly can. And I think they know that of me, and they've allowed us to do the stuff that we've done. But we got the next thing we have to do is this diversion channel. And it's only because last year was so wet, I haven't been able to get the big machinery in to do it. But you had one on your Cassini lake, but I'm really looking forward to having that facility.
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah, you know, I mean,
It's like a
people.
tap.
Yeah, people can, you know, you can go, oh, well, you know, you've got to have this, you got to get this diversion channel, but you've got to remember that having a diversion channel allows you to control water inflow and stop water flow. So in the spring, you can stop it, you can heat the water quicker, you can get your fish to growing temps better, and get them through that 10 to 15 degree period, which is vital for their immune system and enzymes to really be firing. And then you can get water flow through it in the summer if you've got good water source. And as you said, you can then block it off for draining, which makes it much easier.
Yeah.
You know, when we did this place, the DDT allowed us to drop it the metre or so that we did. But it was when there was so much rain. I had 3 4-inch siphons, and that was only keeping up with the water coming in. So then we had to get the big pump in and everything else, which are all, you know, major things.
Yeah.
So with you said you'd set up, when you drained down, you put a proper boarded monk system in. Yeah.
So I had an existing monk, but it was old, and I think within the first 5 years of owning the lake, it failed. So it was on a pretty much a rudimentary pull up, pull down, like a
Gate. Yeah. So similar to here then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that failed, as they would, because they've been in the water for, I don't know, 50 years or something. So suddenly I cannot now manage my giant aquarium, because how can I change water? So the next winter I had to commit to having a new monk installed, which required a full drain down, the fish to go off site to a fish farmer, the new system, a new concrete cast, so everything new. And as I mentioned to you, I don't mind saying, it was €25,000 to do that work. But I thought I had to do it because one day I was going to sell the lake. And, as we know now, you need a certification, you need a sign-off. The DDT needed to see that I had a fully functioning monk. And, it turned out to probably be one of the most important things we did.
Yeah. And that was when? What year was that? Was that sort of early 2012, 2014, something like that?
No, you would have been about 2016, 2017, something like that. I'd had the lake a good 5 or 6 years.
Okay, yeah.
But this was just after it culminated. I'd had my ammonia issue, and then this failed, and I thought, oh my God, I can't have this, because my brother keeps coy, and he has a great saying, dilution is the solution to pollution. And I couldn't dilute anymore.
Yeah.
I had the stream, lovely, clear, oxygenated water, but I couldn't take it if I can't exit the old stuff. So it suddenly became mission critical, fix the monk.
Yeah. So you had a standard overflow and a spillway, the same. Yeah. So in a sense you could do a part dilution, because you'd always get turnover of water coming through, but you couldn't take boards out, drop it a few feet, and then put the boards back in and then refill. Yeah.
So our new system, similar, identical to yours, we put boards in, so we then had the draw of the water from the bottom coming up, going over into the drainage system, and I would look at it every day and smile, because you just saw all the silt particles being sucked up, silt coming out of your lake all the time. It was probably one of the best things I did at the lake, actually. Hurt. Financially, it hurt.
25 grand does hurt in the back pocket, doesn't it? Yeah, 100%. Yeah. All right, so fantastic. I think there's some great stuff there. Now, the running a lake, I've put in here. I mean, for you said about 25 weeks a year.
Yes.
You'd run yours.
Yes.
And you had a jeep with yours, and so like ours, very similar to ours, like Billy's really. It came with accommodation. Yeah, and so so did anglers generally spivvy up and fish, and then had their families with them, or did?
No, I would tend to get, and I think this is probably, particularly coming here, it's made me realise this. If I look in the rear view mirror, the gîte really moulded the type of clientele that we had. It would predominantly be families in the summer months, particularly the school holidays. It would be a couple of guys who would come, but they would like, the comfort of the gîte, or it might be a couple or two couples.
Yeah.
And so I got more of a, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but these weren't the hardcore serious anglers.
Yeah.
So I ended up, I think, naturally designing my lake around the clients that I got.
Yeah.
Because they were just nice people. We got to know them. They become friends.
Yeah.
I wanted them to have a good time, and so I probably moulded the lake around them.
Yeah.
As opposed to probably me thinking, well,
how would I want it for me?
Have done
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah.
And I think if I did it again now, I would do it as you've done it, because what I'm really enjoying here is, I'll catch a fish and it's like, oh, well, this one hasn't been caught for a year. When it's low stock, every bite just brings back all those emotions of the heart's going, you're shaking.
Yeah. Well, we've been doing it for donkeys, haven't we? And so
it's easy to lose that.
Yeah, and that's right. And again, it starts with the beginning with the end in mind. So we've talked about it with Billy, and we're alluding to it now and talking around it. Is if you're looking to buy a lake in France now, you've really got to look in your area, fine tune your market, and is that market going to be people that you're going to really enjoy spending time with? See, for me, the greatest gift and the greatest thing is I come down here with you pair, and I have a couple of lovely beers, a couple of cheeky ones in the afternoon, don't I? Watch you catch a fish. We have a laugh. But not just that, we talk, bloody hell, we've talked politics, we've talked about just about every bloody... And I go up to Sal, and I go, we'll be friends for life now, till we go in the ground. Now, that's pretty bloody special, that is. And so you begin with that, and I knew personally with this place is I knew that if I developed a lake and marketed it to a specific type of angler, of course that person is the same as me in so many ways, and that's proving to be true.
That's good.
So I think so again, if you're buying over here, you've really got to make sure you get that right, because again, if size of lake is a big key factor, Again, if this was 50 acres and we had 20 people here, a completely different kettle of fish.
Let's be honest, you're going to get dickheads, rule breakers, pissheads, potheads.
Yep, the full Monty. Yeah, you're going to get a real cross-section there. So again, you've got to manage that, and is that the right environment for you? Is that what you want? I knew a smaller lake, but... we could have 4 people on this lake, but again, I know as soon as you go beyond 2, you go into problems.
Yeah.
Even 3 people, it's two's company, three's a crowd. It is said. It's not said for no reason. It's a reality, isn't it?
Mine was a similar size to yours, and I always said to people, 3 is the optimum, 4 at a push.
Yeah.
2, 3 was the best, and that suited me because.
Yeah. Well, that allows for sort of 2 families, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe the kids to come and have a bit of a fish as well.
Yeah.
Again, for us, I thought with the fact that you can have boats and bait boats and do whatever, as you know, with me, I assess. We have rules, but I assess the angler.
Yeah.
And if the angler is, I know that I'm not going to have any problems, then I'm much more willing to look at different ways to approach to skin the cat, as long as it's safe for my fish. And so it gives you 3 acres each, really, which gives you a lot of water, really, to fish.
More than enough.
Which is nice. Gives you lots of scope, doesn't it, to change things around.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So we've gone through that. So you didn't run it alone. You actually, but your wife lived there and your kids lived there.
Yes, they did.
So was she involved in changeovers and stuff like that, like Sally is here, and doing?
To a degree. I mean, my kids were young at the time, so circumstance was that because we'd sold our property in the UK, their only residence we had was in France. So my wife and kids went there. Kids went to French school, but they were involved in the running the business because unfortunately I was still away. Working, earning the coin to underpin everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my boys got involved in the handover, 12, 13, 14 years old, doing the meet and greet.
Brilliant, though.
My wife doing the changeover. But it's important to say as well, and I don't think my wife would mind me saying this, it was also tough. It was in the middle of nowhere. In winter, as you know, it's dark by 4, not light till 9.
No,
It can be
it's
quite a solitary life as an adult if you're there on your own. And I think she sort of skirted with, low-level depression because she didn't speak the language.
yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And you're not integrated into society,
No,
are you? When you're a foreigner.
No, so
Yeah.
it wasn't easy. Obviously, kids going to school, that's going to be tough initially.
Yeah,
But as I mentioned to you, if you look at the big picture and play the long game, I look at my kids now. They've learnt a secondary language,
yeah, brilliant.
but they've also grown up as children. In as much as it's still very much a culture here where
Kids are
kids
kids.
can be kids.
Kids are kids, aren't they? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful. We see it all the time. Kids are just beautiful kids.
Yeah.
They're not fast tracked to adulthood at 12 years old,
Yeah.
and all the carnage that can come with that.
So there's
yeah.
pros and cons, but
Yeah.
Eyes wide open, it can be quite lonely, especially in the winter.
And but massive consideration worth looking at if you're moving here, lock, stock, and barrel with your family, because it's our dream. We're fishermen. We're used to sitting out in a bank all on our own, aren't we? But there is a, especially. But sail's the same. Sail's been the same. It's a tough. It takes a while to integrate and a while to make those friends, and groups of people that a lot of people come to France, and again, I'll talk about the cruise area, which is one of the cheapest areas in France here, but also one of the least populated areas. Very different to where you were in northern France. There are even fewer amenities down in this neck of the woods. Everything's 20 minutes here. Everything's 20 minutes to go to. Now you've got to enjoy that.
Yeah.
If you don't enjoy that, if you're someone that likes to just walk down and have a beer in the pub or go down the cafe, you got to drive to that, and it's not the one really. I think you've got to already have assessed the fact that you're quite comfortable living out in the middle of nowhere, which is a different game, isn't it? It is different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your lake, you had 2 to 4 people would fish it.
Yep.
How did you go about? And this is something that I didn't talk really about with Billy, but I think it's very important, and we can chat about it now. How did you? Were the swims already in place, or did you make new ones?
Yeah, we made new ones.
You made new ones.
Yeah, we made new ones. I wanted it to be gravel everywhere.
Yeah.
So we laid, as I've probably mentioned, thousands of tons of hardcore.
Yeah.
And made hard standing, and then I was able to top coat it with gravel. So I wanted somewhere clean where people could be very comfortable. So we created new swims. I think we made 6 swims, so there was room to move.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we made all that. I set up a couple of gazebos so that there was shelter.
Yeah.
With power.
I saw one of them, blooming lovely.
Yeah, it was nice. With Wi-Fi, a few creature comforts.
Yeah.
So we just made it very comfortable.
Now that swim placement, and this is something which again has not been talked about, but as a fisherman, but also as a fishery owner, where you place your swims is a very interesting thing. Like we're here obviously on the main double platform on the dam wall, and so from this swim you can cover and access the whole lake as 2 anglers. But line lay and having line running out through the lake can obviously with low stock lake and fish that start to get a bit cluey can reduce your captures.
Definitely.
So like this week I talked about the use of bottle rigs and with using line clips and line out of the water and stuff like that. And that's enabled, you've had 8 fish now, 8 fish. And it's allowed consistent captures through the week because the fish are being fished for around the lake, which means you're not being pushed into one corner and out the way. But the last few anglers have fished either over on the Rocky or the Long, and what's happened is all the fish have come up into this corner. And so when you're creating your swims in any water, it's really important to understand that your swim placement, you might think fish will behave in a certain way because you put a swim in this place and they're going to respond in this way. But it's amazing uh, how you can't comprehend what placing a swim in a spot, how it changes fish behaviour.
Yeah,
You know, you've caught well right along the dam this week.
yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
you had your big one just along
yeah,
here.
yeah, yeah.
You know, and in recent weeks, everyone's been fishing over there. So I don't think that's by coincidence.
Mm.
You know, I don't, because it's not an area I feed, and it's not an area I've usually seen lots of fish. But in more recent weeks, when there was anglers on the Rocky and on the lawn, we were seeing fish up this end. So again, all they'd done is pushed away from that pressure and moved up into this area. So again, when you're looking at how you place and maneuver and put swims, you have to have them so that it's going to continually move fish around your lake. Because if you create an area where nobody can get to, bet your bottom dollar that's where all the fish are going to get, and nobody's going to catch nothing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we've already talked about this, you know, the profitability, and you thought it was more, you know, it was a lifestyle, so it paid for itself.
Yes.
And did you actually, because I know that you were involved with finance, did you actually do the math on that, or was it something that you didn't really? Because like us, I just done it, and I just done it because we could, and we've just done it, and then I look back at it and go, I don't know how I'd even work out if this is, you know, because, you know, so that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I'm same as you. I just got sucked into the passion of it, and you know the things I wanted to do to make the lake better, and I didn't really consider you know, was it profitable? And I think if I'd that's not, you know, everybody's different. I think if I ruled everything by the bottom line, I would have developed a different lake to what it was.
Yeah.
And you know, I stand proud with how I developed it. It made me no money, but I had a bloody good time.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody's different. Someone could manage it in a different way and really drive the bottom line. We chose not to really offer food. We were a bit ambivalent about bait, but they're all income.
They are all income streams,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Especially if it's a smaller lake. It's they you know, I think, again, if you're dealing, it's something we didn't chat with Billy. They don't offer food there. But obviously, if you're a bigger lake and dealing with more, a lot of people, then you've probably got to involve health and safety coming in. You're going to have kitchen checks. You're going to have all of that sort of stuff,
Insurance,
which is which is another big minefield, which is probably a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, it just takes one problem, and then you're in the stick, aren't you? Yeah. So this is something which we haven't talked about at all. We're getting towards the end of our list of having a chinwag, but we haven't talked about selling. So you sold the property, and you know, again, we started off with this, beginning with the end in mind, the exit strategy, having, you know, especially if you've got a place which you've got maybe 10 or 15 acres of land. How many? What did you have at yours?
I think it was near 30.
30, yeah. So 30 acres. Like here we've got 65, the farm's another 20 odd. You know, massive bit of acreage. You've got to have the gear to manage that and run that, but the exit strategy has got to come. You've got to begin with the end in mind, because once you've spent all that money to develop the infrastructure, make it all nice, if you're getting too old to be able to manage it, then it's a depreciating asset again, isn't it? So having that idea of, right, how long can I maintain this in the standard that it is now before I'm going to need to look to move it? Because otherwise, you're in the end, if you can't get out there on the tractor and you can't get out there on the strimmer and you can't do all that stuff, then your property that might be worth 600,000-700,000 is suddenly only worth 300 or 400, and that in the end, for most of us, well, for us especially here, it is our pension. And I've been self-employed all my life pretty much, and you know, worked for myself, and I was never very good at putting it into pensions because I've lived it, and so Sally, so sort of that side of things is super important. So what was your decision? Why did you make the decision to sell?
was probably threefold. My primary career was coming to an end. I think we used this term earlier. I was becoming too pale, too stale.
Yeah.
So I knew that primary income
You
could...
got a good tan this week, though.
That's true. I knew that was coming to an end.
Yeah.
And that's how I underpinned the quality of the lake. And I didn't want to do it to a different quality. I didn't want to go to a model where I become dependent on the income.
Yeah.
So I probably thought I've got a year before this starts to manifest itself as an end of career for me in the corporate world. But also Brexit was happening.
Oh yeah, that would have been a precursor for a lot of things.
The decision had already been made, but we were getting to the deal.
Yeah.
And I was nervous about that. And then finally, you're away from home and things, family not getting any younger. And I didn't want to live in France and be away from family. It was probably a time, because I'd been living, in the Middle East, it was probably a time to sort of make roots again in the UK. And with Brexit, it was going to be difficult to
do everything. Yeah. So there's a few things that
it was a perfect storm of things that all came together.
Yeah. And so how did you go about it? Obviously you bought off the owner. Did you go with an agent or did you do a private sale?
We went with an agent, and for a couple of reasons. We knew someone, we trusted that person because they were an agent, they were a good friend. But also we wanted to realise a reasonable amount of money back. We wanted to get more than what we paid for it.
Yeah.
Reality is I've probably chucked in as much as what we got, but
yeah.
Our view was in order to achieve the best price, we needed to show it in the best light. So we partnered with a good estate agent, a well-known estate agent, Leggets in France.
Yes, Leggets, very well known. They deal with a lot of lakes, don't they? Yeah.
And it was a price point where they were happy to come and do a video, some drone work, do a brochure.
Yeah, nice.
So suddenly it gives that...
It takes it to that next level.
It feels premium.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah.
I suppose the downside for the buyer is, of course, if it's an agent sale, they're going to have to pay the agent as well as the notaire. So, there is I suppose, a penalty for the buyer. But our view was, well, look, we didn't have the capacity to handle it ourselves. We wanted someone else to do it because when it comes to the nuts and bolts of the sale, I didn't want to be doing all of that.
Yeah.
Because the world had moved on in the 12 years we'd bought it. I didn't want to be providing all the certification, all the documentation, have your electrics checked, your sanitation, your DDT certificate. I would have tied me up in knots for months.
Yeah, it's interesting mentioning those things, though, again, is that we, unlike Australia, for instance, like when we sold our place in Australia, the buyer brought someone in to then assess the property and go through it. Now, again, maybe our due diligence wasn't good enough. Maybe we should have done that here, but it doesn't seem to be a norm here, So a lot of the things that can be problematic, you do not know about here. No. It's not like it is in Australia, where it seems that the buyers, or even before the buy, you've got a survey done on your property, and it will come out with this and this and this and this. There's problem here, problem here, problem here. So at least as a buyer, you understand what potential issues there were. We never had any of that here, and it's not something which is a given. So you've got to. There is a huge amount of due diligence that's needed. I think when you're actually being the buyer, because it's not on the onus of the seller.
No,
that's the key.
I mean, the seller does have to spend some money. I mean, we had to, chimney flues clean and certificated, septic tank system signed off, electrics.
Sorry, an interesting one though, the septic system, because I mean, most people buy their places in France with a non-conforming septic system. I mean, we've spent 15 grand here and put a new one in, like you did at your place, because again, I thought that's the right thing to do, and it needed to be done. But most don't, do they? And you buy it knowing that the septic system is not conforming. Yeah.
And to a degree, that's difficult because with EU regulations, it's changing every 5 minutes. So you put it in yesterday and it's non-conforming tomorrow. So there are degrees of confirmation.
And so you had it with Leggets. How long was the process? How hard was it to find a buyer?
From initial listing to agreeing a sale, would say just over 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know, the early days were a bit quiet. We perhaps sort of set the price a tiny bit too high, so we did adjust. But then, like buses, a couple of people came along at the same time, expressed,
Yeah.
you know, interest. It was important for me to look them in the eye and say, look, you're buying a turnkey business here. There are no surprises.
Yeah.
You're
You've
amongst
done them
brand
all.
new.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, to the degree that we agreed at my cost that we would do a netting. So before paperwork was
To
signed,
assess stock.
we did an audit.
Yeah.
And, you know, he gets to hold all the fish he's going to own.
Yeah.
And they're in there because, well, I know they're in there. I've told him the truth. But it was important to us that, you know, they had a really good experience. And I think I'd like to say they've become friends because, you know, we didn't bullshit them and we haven't
Yeah. Yeah.
tried to, you know, exit with surprises.
Yeah. Nice.
We want them because we were a custodian of a lovely place and we want them to have that same
Well, you
experience.
want want all that work to be
Yeah.
looked after, don't you?
Yeah.
You don't want
Yeah.
someone just going in there and it being going to rack and ruin
So
when you've
what,
put
you know,
life and
I don't
soul
think it's
in.
wham bam selling here. I think and I said to him for a period of months, anytime you just ask me a question and I'll answer it, you know, truthfully. You know, any queries, and there were questions and queries and problems, but we did our best by them to make sure that they built their confidence to run it as they wanted.
Yeah, nice. And I suppose you know, it's like houses. If it's at the very lowest end, there's a bigger pool of people
Yeah.
that have the capacity
Yeah.
to buy it. And as
Yeah.
you go up the scale of property prices, there's a smaller and smaller number of people that are going to do, and that will probably, you know, that will probably guide the length of time that it will be before someone buys it. Yeah.
And we thought a year, so it was roughly a year. So it wasn't outside of our scope, but you know, it's a lot of preparation as well. You need
Yeah.
to show everything in its, and you know, at no point in that time did we drop a gear. We kept it tip top.
Yeah, because that can happen.
Yeah.
We know. Yeah, that can happen, can't it?
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, with that decision, after that decision, what advice would you give someone thinking about selling their own fishery over here, from your experience? Go with an agent, or go private.
I would say go with an agent because certainly when we got to the sharp end of paperwork, I just completely relied on the agent and the notaire to resolve everything because they're both financially incentivised to make this deal happen.
Yeah.
You know, they ain't getting paid unless the deal is done.
And I suppose that the reality of that is that's actually not coming out your back pocket either as the seller here.
Yeah.
So in that sense, probably going through an agent, someone that you know and can trust, and is going to work out all those peculiarities and French law stuffs. It's a no-brainer, really, probably to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the other important thing, certainly what I learned, is, you know, make sure you've got paperwork because when it comes to the capital gains tax calculation in France, you know, there are things you can offset against the potential gain you've made. You know, if you've made capital expenditure, we put tarmac down, terraces, new doors, new windows. Keep those receipts because you can offset an awful lot. We sold as though we were walking out with a suitcase, so there were a lot of you know, machinery, and you know, just stuff that was useful.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier, because capital gain in France isn't massive, and I think we both chatted about this, and Billy will be the same, is when we come to sell here with what we think Fensmere will be worth, if we can break even, I think we'd be good.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where you're looking, right? And that's with a lot of sweat equity as well. You know, if you were doing it, everyone coming in, then I don't think you could.
Yeah.
Because you know, I think you put a lot goes into getting these properties up. But as I said, if as like you just said, if you can have receipts for all that, that will then go against that capital gains, so you won't pay that capital gains.
And I forgot to say, we also engaged a French tax accountant. Probably cost us, I think it cost us €5,000. Okay, so we paid them €5,000 to do our calculation and to achieve us the best deal.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know. The
Yeah.
notaire would do it to a certain degree, but we wanted a specialist.
Yeah.
So we went to a tax specialist and said, look, we need to, mitigate our tax as much as possible, and I think they achieved that for us. I think certainly saved us more than the money I paid them. So
Yeah, well, that's worth doing. Yeah,
It was worth
so
doing.
worth doing. So, in that sense, seek out expertise and people that are bona fide in their role in
Yeah.
France. Again, it's a tricky one, and maybe it's different up in the north of France. I mean, we've got some great accountants here that we're now working with, and I think they'll be with us for a long period of time. They do speak a bit of English, but they're French, and it's we should have done it right at the very bloody beginning, because it would have saved us a lot of money. So yeah, get the right advice. But maybe it's one of them things again. There's so many. You can go down so many dark alleys. It's having the right contacts. It'd be interesting to know. Legates. Obviously, I can put a link for people if they haven't already
I'll
seen.
give you the link for the tax specialist.
For the
as well.
tax
really good.
yeah,
Bilingual, just
brilliant.
really good.
So worth having. So if you're up in that northern France area, having these people that have got recommendations is a key factor, I think, for doing this sort of stuff.
And I mean, the final thing I would say about that, Mark, I'm sorry to go on, but obviously we dealt with our tax in France. We paid our capital gains, but when I went back to the UK, I still had capital gains tax to pay. So, if you're thinking of selling and you take care of your affairs in France, it doesn't necessarily mean that there might be
You're okay with with the English,
but there's a rate that's higher in the UK than it is in France, and so we still had to pay a bit more in capital gains in the UK. So
they love to bend you over, don't they? The old tax man.
Yeah.
So last things, mate. I mean, if so we've gone through most of it, but just to round it up, so if someone's buying a place over here in France, what sort of overriding advice would you tell them? Putting all of what we've discussed into a nutshell, really.
I think this is the most important thing now, knowing what I know, is find someone like Mark. Mark may not necessarily want to do it, but find someone who lives here and has done it, who can help you. That may cost you a few quid, but it's going to save you an awful lot in the long run. That's my number one bit of advice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it how I did it. I got lucky, but if I did it again, I would partner with someone who just
helps.
Just knows this stuff.
Yeah. Brilliant, mate. Well, look, thanks so much for sitting down and having a chinwag.
You're welcome.
We can sit back, look at the lake, maybe get a run in a minute.
About 4 o'clock,
it's about right, isn't it? Probably, if there's any more of them Stella, I might just nick another little cheeky one. But
They're all done, mate.
oh, they've all gone again. He's all gone again. Look, I'll have to go. I'll have to shoot up there and get some Cronenberg. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Cheers, buddy. Thank you. Right. Fantastic.